pleasure to be here today to share a little bit about the Farm Bill and crop insurance decision. Barry took half of my presentation by saying we don't expect an ARC or PLC payment, but I'll go into this and talk a little bit about why I don't think we're going to see an ARC. But first, let's just talk a refresher on what this Farm Bill program is. We've had it now for a few years. This should be the last year, although that's questionable whether Congress will get their act together and get a new one written, whether we'll be living with this one in 2024. Time will only tell. But just to recap what we have today, we must enroll to be eligible for payments. And again, if you think you've done a multiple year enrollment, you may have, but it's still a good idea to check, because if we're not enrolled, then we don't get a payment. Not that that's going to matter a lot this year. I'll show you one scenario that could affect it, but it's highly unlikely. And then we need to make the program elections. And again, the elections will roll forward from last year to this year. So if we don't do anything in terms of our program election, we will have what we had in 2022. And so I'm encouraging everybody to schedule an appointment. I spoke with my FSA office and they said, yes, we'll accept walk-ins now, which is a change from a year ago when we were doing this. But we would really prefer that people schedule a time, because it allows us to get all of the documents ready for signature, and it really reduces the amount of time that the producer needs to spend in here. And so it's really to your advantage as a producer to go ahead and schedule that appointment. So let's think about our federal crop programs that we have. There's really three choices that we have to make. We have the Agricultural Risk Coverage County, which is ARC County, and it's paid on 85% of our base acres. And again, if we haven't thought about this for a while, as I was preparing for this, it was kind of like, oh yeah, that's right. It doesn't pay on planted acres. And so if my planted acres are significantly different than what my base acres are on my property, then I may not be covering my risk very well with any of these coverages. But we have to go back to think about what are those base acres. And typically we don't have all of our farmed acres covered with a base acre. That's usually highly unlikely. The second one is the agricultural risk coverage. And what that does, it's only paid on 65% of the base acres, but the base acres become whatever the crop is that you've planted. And as we've grown in size, a lot of our farms are either all corn or all soybeans or all wheat. And so again, it takes all of those base acres and makes it that crop. And that can be advantage, if our base acres doesn't look like what our farming practices are. And the last one is a price loss coverage. Again, it also is paid on 85% of the base acres. But with the price loss coverage, we'll come back to insurance in a minute, but the supplemental coverage option is only available if we elect PLC as our federal commodity program. And that's because it behaves very similar as an ARC county coverage or an ARC individual in terms of covering that same type of production price risk. But then with any of these choices, we do have the advanced coverage option, enhanced coverage option, excuse me. And that is another option to look at. It's quite pricey, but it does take that top end risk away. And I'll come back to that with another slide. Don't forget the decision is March 15th, 2023. And so I did a little bit of work here. This is kind of a refresher on PLC, a little bit historical and a little bit looking forward. We see that dotted green line going up and down. That's what we know. And so we know if we go back 2016, 17, 18, 19, even in 20, there were small PLC payments for corn. Again, that reference price for corn is $3.70, soybeans is $8.40, and wheat is $5.50. And anybody that thought, well, those can adjust up in time the way the program was written, that is correct, they can. And we expect them to adjust up for 2024 if we're still living in this program. We don't know if they'll take those adjusted prices into the new farm bill or what they'll use. And so that's kind of an unknown at this time, but they did not adjust up for 2023. So we're still at those levels. And so 2022, we don't know yet. There's $6 that's been plugged in for 2022 as the estimate for the market year average. And USDA, when I looked at their February report, they were still plugging $6.80 in for their market year average price for 2023. And we're getting further and further away from that $3.70. The likelihood of $3.70 market year average is very unlikely. As a matter of fact, we're probably all hoping and praying that we don't see that, because that would be disastrous for our agricultural economy. And we look at soybeans and wheat, and I think we're seeing very similar, maybe not as drastic, but Barry gave a price there, $13+ wheat or soybeans, excuse me, Barry, didn't mean to give you a heart attack. $13 plus soybeans, so we know that's quite a ways away from that 840. And I think he had wheat in that $8 range. And so again, highly unlikely that we'll see payments for PLC. Let's go ahead and look at, this is Ross County data specifically, because that's where I live. You know, we had some payments back in 15 and 16, then they went away. And if we look at that golden line across there, that's kind of where our guarantee fell for our crops, and that's 86% of our, it's 85% of our commodities on the base acres, but it's 86% of the protection on those acres. And so that would be the average price times yield times 86%. And so that fell below for the last several years. We're anticipating it's going to fall below 2022 as well as 2023. And so we're making the decision for 23. And so that doesn't look very promising in terms of, will that make a payment, which is probably not a bad thing. But let's go ahead and look at there's kind of, we had some payments, we didn't have some payments. And then if we look at, we really don't think there's going to be any payments. ARC individual, I think we need to think about that for a minute. It's a completely different program. Number one, because it takes those base acres and makes them to the crop that's actually planted. I know we're only getting 65% of that base acres instead of 85% payment. But I think, you know, in those scenarios that makes sense. And here are some scenarios that we've seen over the years while we've been in this program that benefit from ARC IC. And again, we know because of 2019 Northwest Ohio, a lot of crops weren't planted. That 100% preventative plant acres, those farms benefit, at least a payment from ARC IC is greater than ARC County or PLC in those cases. If we have farms that vary a lot, I've got a farmer with a farm that is upland gravel right next to a gravel pit. In a dry year, he gets 60 bushel corn, and in a good year, he gets 200 bushel corn. It's that dry year that he has really benefited from having that farm in ARC individual for whatever crop he plants on that farm that year. And then if we have large acreage of fruits and vegetables, I think that is another option to look at ARC PLC on those high dollar crops where we might have some fluctuation from a frost or a freeze. We're way ahead on our phenology this year. And so, you know, our peaches and our apples are already thinking about it's springtime, and we're still here in the middle of February. That could become very disastrous. Farm Bill Decision A tool. I'm going to direct everybody this year back to Farm Doc. We had one, but we don't have anybody that's keeping that current to my knowledge. David, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But this has been updated for the 2023 decision with historical yields and current price projections for Ohio. And so I give you the link there. I would suggest going and doing a little bit of what if. And I did that little bit of what if. And here's again Ross County. We've got the county benchmark yield at almost 198 bushels per acre. The benchmark price at $3.98, and that gives us a guarantee of $677.67. And I said, okay, what happens with 680 corn if we grow half a crop? So I put 100 bushels in there, and this particular slide is saying how much would Ark County pay compared to PLC. So it's PLC minus Ark County. And so when we get down here, with any of these prices, and we know that the PLC payment is zero, and so it's zero minus the Ark County payment. We take that $100 or 100 bushel yield across to 680. We're still sitting at zero. We start dropping lower yields than 100 bushel an acre. Then we start seeing some Ark County payments. It maxes out at 67. But I guess my thought process is if we have 100 bushel yield in Ohio and it's only Ohio, we don't really grow enough corn to affect the price. Will it come down enough to make an Ark County payment? I don't believe so. If the drought or whatever weather event is across the entire Corn Belt, we definitely will not see lower prices because our supply and demand will drive prices up further. And so I don't think that choosing between Ark County or PLC or even Ark individual makes much of a difference this year. I don't see the probability very high that anything is going to make a payment in terms of those government programs. And so my thought process is let our insurance, again, this year, same as last year, let our insurance drive our commodity program decision. Again, we're going to pick our underlying policy and we're going to think about our high coverage policies. I'm going to go back to that first screen that I shared that showed that SCO or supplemental coverage option could only be used with PLC. If I want to use SCO, then I'm going to lock in PLC, pick out my revenue or my yield protection or whatever product I want in the underlying policy, and then I'm going to select SCO. And so I think we're going to have a little bit of uptick. I had my prices from my crop insurance for my farm. Corn was only up $2. Soybean was up marginally. The input cost and land cost may drive your break even above the revenue guarantee. Maybe not so much this year as a previous year, but again, we need to think about this risk management plan. And so again, talk with your insurance salesperson on your crop insurance and see what works best for you. And so we think about all the underlying policies, and I wasn't anticipating this to be a crop insurance talk, just other than we know that they interact with the ARC PLC decision. And so there's all these policies, but these are really the two that we need to talk about a little bit further. The supplemental coverage option, it is additional coverage that triggers when the actual county revenue falls below 86% of the expected county revenue. And so again, if your farm follows the county fairly well, going to a county coverage probably isn't something that would concern you. But if your farm behaves very differently than the county, then we may want to go a higher revenue protection or product instead of using SCO and maybe go to 85% RP coverage versus then the SCO, that 1% really doesn't matter. But if we want to go and say, yes, we follow the county fairly well, maybe we go down to a 75% RP product and then use SCO to get to 86%. Again, it's a less expensive option, but again, it's not insuring just your farm production. It's going against the county average. Then the enhanced coverage option, really it goes from the 86% up. And so we can go up to 90% of the county expected revenue or all the way up to 95%. And it's, again, an option that takes that top end risk away, but it's quite pricey. And so it applies to all the farms enrolled in ARC or PLC. as an FSA commodity program, so we can't select partial. It's either all or none. So here's my farm. I just put these together. We're looking at an 80% enterprise unit example with revenue protection. The county expected yield, this is down in Claremont County, is 191.7. The price estimate that they're using right now for this insurance quote was 596. And we look at the 90, well, we'll go down to the corn revenue protection at the 80%. Our APH on the farm is 212. And so our underlying policy is going to cover $1,011 in round dollars. And that's going to be for a premium of $33.10 on corn. And then if we say we want a little bit more protection for another $8 for the SCO premium, we can go up to 86%, and that takes that $1,011 and add $76 to it. And so that takes it up to 1,087. And then I said, okay, well, let's look at going to 95% on the ECO premium. For another $35, I get $99 of potential return if there is a disaster. And I think that's a low rate of return for that. But if you have the right scenario that makes sense, you can even do the revenue protection premium, skip the SCO, and do the ECO with our county. So there's all kinds of scenarios we can put together. But I just wanted to give you kind of a physical graphic representation of what that kind of looks like and where those premiums are. Now they'll be different on your own farms, but that is an example for 2023. So don't forget, program election, enrollment, crop insurance are all due March 15th. I know you guys have been working on that. As I talk to my producers in Ross County, many of them have made those decisions already. Looking forward, I don't think price are likely to fall below the effective reference price for any of our crops. I also think that Ark County, I don't think PLC has a snowball's chance in Hades of making a payment in 2023. Ark County could if we have that huge variation in price and or yield. And so again, but PLC has to be paired, or SCO has to be paired with PLC. And so that continues to be the most complete risk management program since SCO behaves similar to Ark County. And the difference is the market year average compared to the season price in terms of what they base their payment on. And then I gave you the link there earlier for the Excel tool. Go and do some playing for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but I'm pretty confident that we're out of the money in terms of